Good afternoon, students. I am your social science teacher, Malvika Daniel, and today we will talk about History, Chapter 1, that is Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. And it is our day 3 today, and I would request all of you students to get a notebook and a pen and write down whatever we discuss in the class today. So, the topics that we will be covering in the lesson are region and empire, that is the first topic, and the second topic is old and new religions. After that, we will revise what we have done today. Also, I have prepared a set of questions for you that you must answer, and then we will discuss the answers. So, without wasting any more time, let us get started. So, children, do you know that we are talking about 700 to 1750 Common Era? We'll be taking this time period, and during this time period, there were various dynasties that started coming up, and these dynasties, they were in different regions and they had distinct geographical dimensions, and these dynasties, they had their own languages and their cultural characteristics. Also, these were always in conflict like terms with other dynasties or with other states. Okay, children. So these dynasties that came up during this period from 700 to 1750 Common Era, these were pan-regional nations or empires. Now a question may arise in your mind that what is pan-regional? So children, when we talk about an empire or a nation being pan-regional, we mean that such a nation influences other nations' actions. It can be completely or partially, but they do have a power over other nations. Okay, so the various pan-regional empires that were there during those time were the Cholas in the south, then we have Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, Mughals in North India, and all these together, they were the pan-regional empires. And they were quite stable and successful, and they spanned in various and diverse regions. One thing we must know is that since these dynasties or empires, they had their own cultural characteristics, sometimes they even shared traditions. Okay, children. For example, the way they used to manage their economy, that could be similar. All the culture of the elite or the higher classes, that could also be similar. And sometimes the language was also similar. So we can say that through the 1,000 years between 700 to 1750 Common Era, these dynasties or these cultures, they did not grow in isolation. That means they were not aloof or they were not alone. Okay, all these, they were simultaneously prospering together. Okay, so be it the Cholas, the Khiljis, the Tughlaqs, the Mughals, or other dynasties, they were all pan-regional, and they all used to have their own languages or their different geographical dimensions or cultural distinctiveness, but they were also something that was similar, like they could be similar traditions, and also there were forces of integration in these dynasties without these dynasties losing their own distinctiveness. So they used to survive together and not be aloof or isolated. So the first topic, that is region and empire, we have talked about it. In this, children, you will explain the meaning of pan-regional empires. Okay. The next topic that we will discuss today is the old and new religion. So in this we will be talking about the way Hinduism developed and the way Islam developed. So let's start with Hinduism. And during this time, Hinduism, that is the time period is children 700 to 1750 Common Era. Okay, and during this time in Hinduism, there was a worship of new deities. New deities mean children god or goddesses. Okay, and then the royalty or the rulers, the Hindu rulers that were there, they used to construct temples. Also, in this time, in Hinduism, the Brahmins or the upper caste, we know na children, there is a caste system, and the Brahmins, they used to be the upper caste, and they used to be the teachers, or they used to be priests. So these Brahmins, they started getting dominant role in society in Hinduism. Why they got dominant role? Firstly, because they were the only classes that had the knowledge about the Sanskrit text. So because of this reason, they got lot of respect in the society, because no other people apart from the Brahmins were taught the Sanskrit or Pali or Prakrit. Okay, and that is why they got lot of respect. They became more dominant. And apart from that, all the other rulers that were there, all these rulers, they used to support such patrons. Now, you must be wondering, what is the word patron? Children, patron means an influential or a wealthy individual who supports another person. That person can be an artist, or a craft person, or a learned man, or a noble. So these rulers, they were patrons. Okay, so they used to support all the Brahmins. Why they used to do that? Because then they would get more prestige, they would get more power, and they would be respected. So that is what the rulers used to do. And also during this time in Hinduism, the idea of bhakti came up. Okay, so bhakti, bhakts or bhakti, it was a way of worship in which the devotees or the people would reach to God without getting help from the priest or without performing any elaborate rituals. Okay, so they could just pray and sing or chant and get or develop a close connection with God. That is like more personal connection with God, and they did not need anybody like a priest or a pandit. They would not require such people. They could just do the worship themselves. So sort of you can say it is more a personal relationship, the devotee with the God. And such ideas of bhakti came up, and we will be reading about this in our later chapters. Also, I would like to give an example that one of the most famous Bhakt we know was Mirabai, and she was a Krishna Bhakt. And so during this time we can see that Bhakti and Sufi movement also developed, and these were the changes that we see in Hinduism that took place. Now let's have a look about what took place in Islam. So children, as we know that there was a new religion that started coming up in the Indian subcontinent, that was Islam. So how did Islam reach the Indian subcontinent? It was because all the merchants and traders and migrators, they started getting their teachings, and they brought these teachings to India in the 7th century. Okay, always remember that Islam reached India in the 7th century. And so these merchants, they started coming up, bought their teachings in India. And as we know that Muslims, they study the Holy Quran, and it is considered as their holy book. And we also know that in Islam, they accept only one God, that is Allah, and they believe that whoever believes in Allah without whatever their social background may be, the Allah will give His love and show His mercy on those people. So this was the basic crux of what Islam was about, and the people who spread the idea of Islam were initially merchants and migrants, and they brought this idea of Islam in India in the 7th century, and we know that Quran is their holy book, and they believe in one God. So that is what Islam was about. Also, as we'll be reading in further chapters, like Mughal rulers in Delhi Sultanate, they were followed Islam, and they were also patrons of Islam. Along with such rulers, they were the ulemas. Now, children, you may be wondering what or who were ulemas. So, ulemas were basically very learned Islamic priests. Okay, and these were very learned people of Islam or Shariat or Sharia, that is called the Islamic law, and they used to aid and help the rulers in getting a good judgment, or whenever the ruler needed a help, the ulemas used to help the rulers. So since they were such learned theologians and jurists of Islam, and we also know that during this period Islam also got differentiated into two sects. One was the Shias and other was Sunnis, and we know that Shia Muslims, they believed in Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was basically a messenger of Allah, and these Shia Muslims, he spread Allah's teachings to the people. So that is what the Muslims believe, and so these Shia Muslims, they believed that Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law Ali, his name was Ali, and he was the right leader for Muslim community. Whereas the Sunni Muslims, they accepted the authority of Khalifas or their early leaders. So this was the difference that was there between the Shias and the Muslims, and these were two sects of Islam. So that is what Islam was about. So today, children, we talked about the pan-regional empires, and we talked about the changes that took place in Hinduism during the 700 to 1750 Common Era, and the changes that took place in the Islamic communities, and how Islam spread in the 7th century, and so on and so forth. So I have prepared some questions for you. Let's have a look at them. Now these are the questions. The first question is, what are pan-regional empires? Give examples. And if you remember, we did this now. And pan-regional empires were basically those empires or nations that had great influence on other nations' actions, whether they could be completely influential on them, or they could be partially influential on them, and these could be in their language or the cultural characteristics they had. And the example of pan-regional empires are Cholas and the Khalijis, the Tughlaqs, the Mughals. All these were pan-regional empires. Okay, students, also I told you that during this time, they did have their own differences, these dynasties. Like, they could be in their cultural characteristics or their geographical dimensions, but there were always something or the other that sort of, bounded them together. That could be, the way they used to manage their economy, or have shared traditions, like the way the elite culture was there, or languages. And these dynasties, they did not prosper alone at that time. Okay, be it the Cholas, the Mughals, the Delhi Sultanate, or the Tughlaqs, they used to have sort of a relationship between them, or a sort of a force of integration was there, and all these, they did not lose their distinctiveness. So they were all very different, yet they had something or that was similar also. So the next topic we discussed was patron. So as I told you earlier, third question is define patron. Patron is somebody, or the rulers were patrons, and these were generally very influential and wealthy individuals who would support another person for their talent. For example, he could be a fine artisan or a craft person, or he could be a learned man, or he could be a noble or a priest. And these patrons, who were generally very wealthy, like the rulers, they would support such people. Okay. Last question is, list the religious developments that took place in Islam during this period. And we can see that merchants and traders and migrants, they got the idea of Islam in the Indian subcontinent in the 7th century. And then the Muslims, as we know, they study Quran, the Holy Quran. It is their holy book, and they believe in one God, and they believe that whoever believes in Allah, despite of what social background they may be, that Allah will bless that person and will show his love and mercy on that person. Also, we got to know that there were many rulers who who were patrons of Islam. We will be reading about this in Mughal Empire or Delhi Sultanate. And they were also rulers were dependent on ulemas, and ulemas were basically very learned theologians. And as I told you earlier, these ulemas, they knew about Shariat or Sharia, that was the Islamic law. They used to help the rulers in making wise judgments, and as and whenever the ruler needed any help, the ulemas used to help him. Also, we get to know that there were two sects in Islam. First was Shias and the others were Sunnis. And Shias, they believed in that Prophet Muhammad's son Ali, he was the right legitimate leader, whereas Sunnis believed that Khalifa, or the earlier leader they had, should be the right or legitimate leader. So these were the differences between the Shias and the Sunnis. Also, we have not discussed question number 2, that was Hinduism, the developments that took place in Hinduism. So when we talk about Hinduism, we will be talking about how there was worshipping of new deities during this time. We're talking about question number 2. And also the rulers used to, or the royalty would construct temples. Then Brahmins, they got more importance and they became more dominant. Why they became more dominant? Because they were the only people who had knowledge about Sanskrit, and that got them a lot of respect. Then there was emergence of bhakti culture, and in bhakti culture, the devotees could just have a personal relationship with their god without any help from any priest or perform any elaborate ritual. So that is it, students. I will see you again tomorrow at the same time. I hope you all stay safe and take care.